Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. According to a new study by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, or GAO, African American students, boys, and children with disabilities are disproportionately expelled or suspended in K-12 schools. What makes this news different is that the disparity happens despite socioeconomic conditions. In other words, be it an affluent or a poor public school, children of color are disciplined more and more harshly than other students. This is just one of today's topics for our Another View pundits, and we have some new voices at the table. So stay tuned. Another View is next.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Before we get to our roundtable today, I want to tell you about an event that's going to be happening in our area. It's called Hymns for Him, which is a nonprofit organization founded in September of 2016 to foster a broader understanding of the importance of hymn preservation through seminars, lectures, workshops, and performances. So if you go to church, you know that hymns are a very important part of the services. And so there's a workshop. It is happening April 25th through 28th of this month. Registration is required, and you can go to hymns, HYMNS, for him, HIM.org. So that's hymnsforhim.org. It's going to be held at Second Calvary Baptist Church on Corporate Avenue in Norfolk. So if you play for a church, or if you'd like to sing, you want to be a part of this, please go check it out at hymnsforhim.org. So last month we said goodbye to our original roundtable pundits, Roger Chesley, Carol Pretlow, Bill Thomas, and Will Leviste. And I'm excited today to introduce you to some familiar voices and some new voices at the table. Tim Seibles is Poet Laureate and a professor of English at Old Dominion University. Hey, Tim.
Hey, Barbara. Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks so much for being with us today. And Bill, our community activist and favorite AV pundit, Mr. Bill Thomas, is back. Hello there, Mr. Thomas.
It's a wonderful God bless day.
Yes,
I'm glad
is.
to be here. Good day to you.
Good day to you, too. And for his first appearance on Another View, please welcome real estate professional William Russ Brown. Hello there, William. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Barbara. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you. William stepped up to the plate when we called out for some new voices on the air, and so this is his trial run to see how he does today.
Trial is the key word.
That's fantastic. And he's been a guest on Another View many times, but is joining us for the first time as a roundtable pundit, Washington attorney and executive director of the African American Trust for Historic Preservation, Mr. Amos Jones, who joins us by phone today. Hello, Amos. How are you?
Hello, Barbara. Good afternoon, panel. Good afternoon, Hampton Road.
Thanks so much, and we appreciate you being here, and our condolences to you. We understand you had a death in the family, which is why you could not join us in person today, but we appreciate you being on the phone, so thanks so much.
Got our prayers.
So, the names Stephen Clark, Danny Ray Thomas, Saheed Vassal, do any of these names mean anything to you? Let's take a listen.
On April 4th, officers in Brooklyn, New York, shot and killed a mentally ill man who was holding a piece of a welding torch, pointing it at people on the street. Police say 34-year-old Saheed Vassal raised the torch as if it were a gun and pointed it at them. Witnesses have said the officer said nothing before firing. Police officers say they repeatedly shouted, "Drop it." According to the chief of police, 5 officers responded, 3 in plain clothes and 2 in uniform, and fired 10 bullets in all. Vassal was pronounced dead at the Kings County Medical Center. 2 weeks earlier, on March 18th, 22-year-old Stephon Clark was fatally shot by Sacramento police officers. The police department said Clark, who was in his grandmother's backyard, advanced toward them while holding what they believed was a firearm. According to the autopsy, Clark was struck 8 times, mostly in the back. Protesters have taken to the streets nearly every day since Clark was killed, demanding that the city's leadership fire the officers involved. An independent autopsy contradicted police accounts, stating that Clark would not have been moving toward officers when they opened fire. Police say they were relying on information about the suspect from a police helicopter circling overhead, and once they confronted Clark, they ordered him to show his hands. Outside experts examining the case say it would be difficult to determine if the officers could be held criminally accountable. 1 week later, 34-year-old Danny Ray Thomas was fatally shot by a sheriff's deputy in Houston near a busy intersection. According to witnesses, Thomas was in the intersection with his pants around his ankles, talking to himself and hitting vehicles as they passed by. The deputy intervened after Thomas got into an altercation with the driver of one of the vehicles he'd hit. Police say the deputy ordered Thomas to stop, and Thomas ignored his commands. The deputy said he feared for his safety and shot Thomas once in the chest. Thomas was taken to a nearby hospital where he later died. Thomas's sister told a local news station that her brother had not been in his right mind since his wife drowned the couple's 2 children 2 years earlier. In wake of these recent shootings, the American Civil Liberties Union, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and the NAACP have called on Congress to take action on what's being described as a national crisis of fatal police shootings. For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
Now, according to the Washington Post, there have been 43 black people shot and killed by police from January through March 23rd of 2018. So here's my question to you, Roundtable, and Amos, I'm going to start with you. So why aren't we pouring in the streets? Why is the outcry, or is the outcry too low, too late, or not happening at all?
Well, I believe we're at a point, sort of like with the gun violence epidemic, that we have accommodated ourselves and our temperaments to systemic injustice and patterns of carelessness, recklessness, or direct racial discrimination. And we had been mobilized around 2015, 2016 with the Mothers Movement and other groups of the Ferguson to Geneva Shadow Report that was written to show and reveal this epidemic. And I think that people have gotten weary again, and we've let our guard down. That's, I think, accounting for some of this lack of response that you've noted.
Tim, I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, I was going to agree. I think there's a kind of a little bit of an exhaustion that has set in. I think most of us know that it takes a long time to really change the way a culture operates or the way a culture thinks, whether it be about race or gender or whatever. And I do think sometimes, there's a lot of energy invested initially when we think about the Trayvon Martin killing and the killing of the brother in Missouri. But I think it's hard. Yeah, Michael Brown. I think it's hard to sustain that, and I think people do run out of gas. I do think that we will refuel in the streets. People may take to the streets again in force, but it's hard to sustain that kind of energy, especially if you have your own life to live and families to raise and jobs to go to and so on. I think it's hard to stay in the street.
Okay, so William, if that's the case, then does this mean this is just going to continue to happen?
I think we are very much getting used to this. And when you get used to things, sometimes it doesn't bother you as much because instead of it it becomes the norm instead of the exception. And when it becomes the norm, sometimes that energy is not there until something great happens. Not that these things aren't great, but it's almost a part of everyday life. Well,
Bill, now I've seen you shake your head through every comment and a negative. So what are you saying? What do you think?
I don't know if people watched the program 60 Minutes last Sunday where they were talking about the lynching of Negroes and others.
Hold your mic up a little bit, Bill, so they can hear you.
Forever. Yeah. And these are all nothing but excuses. We lack leadership. This is outrageous. I'm mad as hell. I've always been mad as hell. I was stepping around these neighborhoods talking about the same thing when 35 of our people were being killed in these neighborhoods. It's been cleaned up and helped out a lot. There's been at least 16 shootings of African Americans over the last 2 weeks in this area here as well. We lack leadership. It's got nothing to do with rules and Geneva rules and all that kind of stuff. Intolerance, racism, and this privilege, white privilege, have allowed our kids to die on the streets blood run. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's these gentlemen here, the gentleman in Sacramento, or my son. Nothing is being done. We have 47 African-American leaders in Congress. 47. They'll get up there and protest everything in the world but black men getting murdered on these doggone streets and won't say a doggone thing. For this kid to get shot in the back 8 times? Yeah. Well, they hung 1,000 of us and we never said anything. Now we went through Jim Crow and they just pulled us out and beat us and chained us and killed us. We didn't say anything. We're too much worried about the process instead of protecting our people. Black lives don't mean a darn thing if we allow our policies to kill our children. And then we sit back up here and say, well, we got to do this or not and everything. It's disgusting.
So what do we need to do about it, William?
I think one of the main things is that when these police officers shoot us and then they go to trial and they get off, I think that's the main problem because they use
Alton Sterling. That just came up very recently where they released the video of this officer with the gun in his face, in his hand and so forth, but they're not going to prosecute the officer.
Yeah, because the officers have to feel like they can do this without getting into any trouble or any reprimand or any of that nature. As long as they keep getting off, there's always going to be these shootings no matter how much we protest.
Tim?
But I agree with you, of course. I just think I'm trying to figure out what you can do. I mean, how can we make sure these officers are brought to justice? That's the problem because, of course, if every time you killed someone unarmed, you lost your job, that might change some things pretty quickly. But if you can kill someone who's unarmed and say, but his cell phone looked like a gun or the pipe looked like a gun, if you can keep doing it, I mean, I just think it's as though protest it's a mockery of protest in a certain way. And also killing black folks, as you were saying, Bill, nothing new. It's been going on for a long time. The videos that we have now that we see of it, of course, changes the discussion quite a bit, but it's not new. I grew up in Philadelphia during the Rizzo era. Black folks getting shot by his police officers, bombed too. But I was not living there then, and that was under someone else's watch.
Yeah, that's true.
Rizzo,
that is true. Rizzo was
then.
not there then.
But it's kind of maddening. I'm not sure exactly what to do. I mean, I think protests are good to bring attention to certain things, but it's not like people don't know this is going on. So I would love to know how we would approach it in a way that would actually affect some real change.
Well, let's ask the attorney then. Amos, I mean, is there a legal way to stop this, or does the outrage just have to come from the community itself?
There are legal restraints and constraints that are largely reactive. The law comes in after the tragedy happens, except in the fact that the decisions that occur, as the panelists have noted, if officers were penalized and lost their jobs, it could be a deterrent to recklessness or willful shooting. It used to be police officers willfully shot these folk in no encounters, almost just went out hunting Negroes. Those days are over because of the law. As Dr. King said, a law can't make you love me, but it can keep you from lynching me, and that's important too. At this point, it's an issue of, as I think it was, I think Tim said it was, or Bill rather, it's an issue of leadership, and it's an issue of courage. Eric Holder came under fire for announcing that we had become a nation of cowards on race. I would disagree. We've become a nation of cowards, period. We allow people to lynch us on our jobs.
Absolutely.
And the court system does not work in that regard either. The judges are the ones behind a lot of this. The decisions that take place in a trial are made daily by judges. And many of these judges are not accountable, including state court judges who are supposed to be elected officials.
Amen.
They'll tell you in a minute, this is my courtroom, and in my courtroom we don't. Shut up, it's the people's court. It's my client's court more than yours. You're a government worker, judge. But they don't know their place. So we got to get accountable with these judges, these DAs, and everybody. But the other thing we have to do is to create conditions where we are not, in many of these cases, in these areas of economic depression and joblessness that are feeding into these encounters, like Ferguson, where black people are basically an underclass. And the way that we do that is through job improvement, investment in these communities, incentives for companies to do business. And by all means, we have a businessman on the panel, and I'm glad because independence happens and power happens in an economic system like ours through economic independence and economic clout. And the fact of the matter is, if we control more of our businesses and employed our own people, we would have more empowerment, and we wouldn't have some of these ghettos where some of these things are happening that are a function of slavery, that are not our fault, and that could be improved if we were getting our fair share of Small Business Administration-backed loans. Unfortunately, we've had black presidents, commerce secretaries, and everything else, and we're worse off by all of these economic measures than we were relative to white people 30, 40, 50 years ago. We are more a mirror of slavery now than we were, and the police shootings and the lack of leadership and the failure to have courage and conviction are all a function of our conflicted economic situation where we have to be able to afford health care, we have to be able to afford these big expensive mortgages, and we have to be able to afford these big expensive college bills they've trapped us with by jacking up the prices exponentially over the last 2 generations. So when you have all that, you got to hold on to your cheap little job so you aren't going to protest in the street. So we've been caught in a trap.
Okay. Well, let me let William respond to this, to the whole idea of the economic independence, and if that in fact would make a difference.
It makes a big difference. It's a systematic problem that we have. This has been built into the system. They have the buzzwords or the dog whistles in court that says, I was afraid, I was scared. And when you have a majority white people on the jury that can be sympathetic with that, all you have to say is, I was scared. You know, I was threatened with my life because I thought it was a gun.
This is what the police say when they go before, if they are brought before the courts.
So in essence, when you have an economic system that's not working in our favor, even if we go into school working hard, it's still hard to make a living at, $2.35 as a minimum wage for workers. So I think if we increase the economic ability of the folks, education is important, and the most important thing is that we're going to have to put some of these cops behind bars who feels that they can just shoot us at will.
And Bill, I'm coming to you. Now, let me ask you guys a question, because we've got 4 African American males on this panel. I mean, do you think about this on a daily basis? And are you afraid? Go ahead, Bill.
I'm afraid.
Okay, hang on, Amos. Let me get Bill first, and then I'll come to you.
The attorney is I'm liking him a lot because, number one, he's a lawyer and he understands the process and the institutionalized policies that keeps us in these holes. I fear every day for my 2 boys who used to walk these streets here, which I didn't allow them to do, and even now that they're away because their lives are in danger. The problem that I said 25 years ago when Mayor Mason Andrews asked me in city council meeting what was the problems with Park Place, I said there's 3 problems. First problem is jobs, second problem is jobs, and the third problem is jobs. And then what undergirds that is a system of miseducating our community in these public schools, not all, but by zip code some, where we're not preparing our kids to walk out these schools with talents and skills. It's deplorable. You're just walking into jail. They're not doing that to us. And we continue to have these folks, helicopter in, like we did last week in Norfolk with the Secretary of HUD, talk all that stuff and not directing to the issues that needs to be done. We're just killing ourselves. People say you got to vote every day. You do vote every day. Every day you spend $1, you are voting. Gentlemen, you were just saying, sir, that, we don't have the economic power. We have an economy that's probably the 8th largest economy in the world among us, if we just looked at it that way and stop spending our money that people that hate us, or stop supporting candidates that don't do the things that are in our behalf.
Right.
We're in the Virginia General Assembly right now in a budget, reconvening in the General Assembly to do things that aren't taking care of our education, aren't paying our teachers $1, because the people that have dollars, they don't send their kids to public schools, so they don't care.
Right.
We're not taking care of our health care, as the gentleman just said, the attorney. We can't get access to Medicaid and Medicare. That's insane. It's insane. And then we don't argue about that. And none of our elected officials sitting up there saying our people need this. But at the same time, and I'll be quiet here, we are the ones that are putting these people in position. We elected Terry McAuliffe. The white women didn't vote for him. The white men didn't. We did. But are our schools any better? Is funds coming to us that's going to help us? No. And so the problems that I see right here is the fact that we have to focus with policies that the attorney is talking about to make sure that they're changed. They're just not keeping us in this hole forever. And the last thing is we got to deal with the real issue. The real issue is that, and it's unfortunate, and I believe, and everybody should be loving each other, but there's a good number of people don't like me and you and us simply because we're black. And we're never going to have a right to do anything because they literally think they are better than us. And we won't deal with that. Not in the White House, but in our churches and synagogues. We won't deal with that. How in the world could you shoot these men down like dogs? If these people would have been dogs, those police officers would have been fired. And you tell me I'm lying. And it's a shame because we won't deal with racism and institutionalized racism in every aspect of our lives.
Tim.
I was just going to say, to me, the critical thing, and you mentioned it, Bill, and part of what you were saying is, we have to think very seriously about education. There are only so many things we can control. I, like you, agree that I would love to live in a society where we could address racist attitudes in some way that would change them. Certainly there are people whose attitudes have changed, some, but there are plenty of people who are still bigots, and many of them in powerful places. But one of the things we have some power over is the ways in which we are educated, or in the ways in which our children approach the idea of becoming educated. Now, I know all parents aren't great and all that, and I grew up with a variety of friends whose parents were in various ways, but it seems like just a fundamental interest in becoming educated as a way of attaining a certain level of agency in the society. It's like somehow that focus has been lost. Now, again, I'm speaking from just my own position, but if black folks and other folks of color, of course, are able to educate themselves in a way that allows them to enter the workforce and enter professions in a way that we, at least at this point, have not been able to, then perhaps some of the dynamics change. Maybe there are more black judges, more black police officers, more. I'm just thinking that maybe.
We got all these people.
I'm just saying, that. But certainly the absence of those people will not help. So I can only think that the more we have such people in professions in higher places, the better chances we have to change the society.
Well, let me ask you this then, Amos, because I'm just curious. Tim says, if we can get more educated people, if we can get more of us into those positions, but then because racism is so institutionalized, are they stopped? Or do they not have the courage to push forward?
Largely both. And I'm speaking as a plaintiff side employment discrimination attorney, where I go all around the country and literally open the books on discriminatory institutions, including government agencies. And I see co-opted black people. We all know about the trick of the black woman in charge of human resources.
Absolutely.
To make you think that there's somebody in there on your side, and the company is treating the complaining, discriminated against victim as the problem and the thorn in the side. And the racist people who are clearly guilty, the evidence shows, get promoted, and they get to stay. And as long as that's the case, anybody with hey, if you're highly educated, you're smart enough to know, if I really need this money and really need this job, I better sit down and shut up and be a good Uncle Tom sitting by the door and keep my little cheap gig going.
Amen.
And that's what we have, because, remember, the gaps have gotten much wider now.
Absolutely.
We have 3 examples. We're not lost. We've had not just a failure of leadership, we've had a war on black leadership since Dr. King got shot to death. And we have 3 examples that I just want to hold up of where we were going in the right direction. We weren't having a lot of police problems. I'm talking about the 1970s and 80s. If you look at 3 examples, it goes back to leadership, it goes back to collective action, but it also goes back to economic ability and understanding of black people and education. And I lift up the examples of Detroit in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where there weren't large numbers of educated black people, but there were black people that had those good factory jobs when that could put you close to the upper middle class back in those days. Of course, now black people aren't even needed for labor because you can get that in China and Mexico for cheap. So that's why black men are obsolete, standing on the street corners without work in places like Ferguson. So Detroit, they had economic clout, and that in turn informed their revolutionary mindset with regard to political authority and business enterprise growth. So you had a strong Detroit for a long time because of people like Coleman Young and Judge Crockett, when black leadership thought in a black idealistic way and work together. Atlanta's another example. Mayor Jackson knew what a black mayor was supposed to do. A black mayor is supposed to share the city's resources with black people. So he demanded 25% minority participation on the airport project. It was completed with excellence, and that project alone created 21 black millionaires in the 1970s in Atlanta. What is a black mayor for? But opening up, as he would say, a piece of the pie to the people. And finally, Washington, D.C. Marion Barry created a vibrant black middle class, not just in Washington, D.C., but in Prince George's County, which is the wealthiest black jurisdiction in the world, because he employed so many people, the city lost track of how many workers they had. Washington had 550,000 residents and 17,000 city workers. L.A. had 3 million residents and 5,000 city workers. And the city has flourished today because of the blueprint and the cooperative work, because all these guys knew how to work with the white folks as well and the people with money. We don't have that kind of political leadership. We don't have that kind of orientation toward business, commerce, and entrepreneurship on the ground, which in turn employs more blacks. And we don't have that kind of housing opportunity today because of gentrification, except in Detroit, which has been abandoned. So the fact of the matter is we don't have to get.
But even Detroit is coming back now at this point, isn't it?
Central Detroit
it's coming back, and thank God the black people have high rates of home ownership in Detroit and always have since the factory jobs were there. And Henry Ford had a personal friendship with the black pastor of the Black Second Baptist Church, and black folk could go up there from the South and get a job. We used to know how to do our diplomatic work to advance our people, and it seems like now we're politically incompetent, and that's a big part of the problem.
Okay, go ahead,
it's
Bill.
not everything is certainly not 100% of anything. I mean, we have some things that are not working, but we do have some things that's working. And from my experience of the last 25 years, I have met several outstanding political people that were elected that understood the interests of the community as a whole, but in the black community in particular. And that's Delegate Gerald Jones when he was in the Virginia General Assembly and he was the head of the Legislative Black Caucus. We only worked on economic issues with Gerald, with Delegate Jones at the time, now Judge Jones. He worked on it. The other gentleman that I had a good experience with was Mayor Kenny Alexander. When he was a delegate and when he was a senator, in terms of how he worked with us at Hampton University, we created a HBCU. We're the only HBCU in the country that's a business, because you can't get contracts without the process. So we got a bill through the General Assembly to do that. He also helped us understand the other issues that we had to do in terms of economic empowerment. We let the other people deal with it. So there isn't like a whole vacuum of it, but those guys, but those guys get so much pressure from the establishment and also from the community itself that the people don't have good sense to understand that Norfolk State has been cheated for how many years it's been involved in educating black people. We're never fully funded, nowhere near it. It's a damn shame, excuse the language if I got you in trouble, that we allow, this is just, then that's hanging, that's lynching.
Yeah.
That's shooting people in the black when you can't educate your people, and the same thing that's going on. And what has happened, and I'm going to be quiet after this for a minute, and I'd be interested in the attorney's point on this. What has happened is we have changed the issue of dealing with black folks in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment and the Civil Rights Acts of 64 and 65 from dealing with the people that had been damaged. Those were Africans. It's now diversity. It's diversity. Absolutely. The Native American universities in America get about $700 million a year in federal funding. Federal funding. You know who's a Native American university?
Who?
University of Arizona.
I don't.
Really?
Arizona, UCLA. They can get 20 or 30% of folks there to do with some minimal number, and then they can compete with HBCUs for funding. So during the Obama administration, we lost over $500 million worth of funding. The pie wasn't cut. Actually, the pie was expanding. The funding was just shift to Native Americans, universities like those in the Southwest.
So then we become in competition with other minorities
No, it's not
in order to get the money.
They win. They win. They win. They'll win every time.
Okay, hang on just 1 second. If you're just joining us, we're discussing current events is our Another View Roundtable. Poet Laureate Tim Seibles, community activist Bill Thomas, real estate expert William Russ Brown, and attorney Amos Jones. Go ahead, Amos, and then we're going to change subjects.
We've been displaced.
Thank you.
Where there was a bait and switch done. The 14th Amendment was about black people becoming citizens.
Absolutely.
That's what it was.
Absolutely.
And then we have all these, and what's so funny is some of our national politicians are doing the bidding of every other new group but us, and many of these groups actually overlap with whites.
Thank you.
Some of these groups claiming the mantle of diversity, but yet we have the Civil Rights Act of 1964 because black girls died in the 16th Street Baptist Church, and Black Martin Luther King brought these interests on behalf of black people who were just out of slavery. That's why we have a Civil Rights Act of 64. So, but yet the EEOC, and I tell my clients this, I've never had the EEOC bring any charges on behalf of a black person, and I've done about 100 cases. They don't do that for black people.
Amen.
In my experience, they do it for all these other new groups that aren't even in the statute, frankly, in some cases.
So you're saying,
and
Amos,
we're afraid because we need that political money, so we do the bidding of other people now.
So Amos, are you saying then that you bring cases with black complainants and they don't take the case? Is that what you're saying?
They take the case, but they say that there's no cause to find discrimination, even when it's smoking gun discrimination.
Absolutely.
Every case I've seen, it's somebody other than a black. Every now and then, the EEOC will bring charges for a black person. And I'm just telling the truth about it. I've talked about this at academic conferences and so forth over and over again. And every time you turn around, frankly, President Obama expanded the enforcement mandate of the EEOC.
Absolutely.
And it just further displaced black people
Absolutely.
by adding groups into the EEOC who are not in the statute. And yet we marched and died for all of this. And if you stand up and say these things, particularly in an academic context, you get pushed out by a lot of the black people who've been paid to be the diversity chairs and the chief diversity officers who are there with the backing and the money of these other groups. Black people as a group are very bad off wealth-wise and economically. We're the worst off group in the country.
Amen.
That has not changed. And the fact is nobody's going to do business with us if we're viewed as being that disempowered. And that's not our fault. We are still victimized by the failure to do anything after slavery to emancipate us into famine, as Dr. Martin Luther King has said. We were emancipated into famine, and we're all about pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, but as Dr. King said, it is a cruel fiction to ask a man without boots to pull himself up by some bootstraps.
All right, I hate to change the subject, but we're going to change the subject because I want to talk
this
about
is real.
I know this is real, and you're absolutely
it's a systematic problem.
It's an institutionalized problems that build into every phase of our existing: health, jobs, income, education, law, everything. How in the world can you shoot a black kid in the back in Sacramento, California, 8 times in the back, and nobody's held accountable right there immediately? I'm telling you, if you would have shot a dog, everybody would have done something about those people and snatched whoever did it, Michael Vick or whoever, they would have went and got them and tried to dehumanize them.
Well, you talk about education. And that's why I want to move the conversation to, because the Government Accountability Office recently released a study on the disparity of discipline for African Americans, boys, and children with disabilities. And they found that children of color, black children, are in fact suspended or expelled at a far greater rate than white kids. And the new twist is that socioeconomics don't matter. Rich or poor, black kids are more likely to be harshly disciplined, even though white kids commit the same infractions. Tim.
Right. Well, absolutely. But the thing is, as long as there's this overarching racist worldview that is in operation, it doesn't matter whether it's in school or on the job or anywhere else. Probably black people or other folks of color, but black people for our purposes are going to probably bear the brunt of that bigotry. I mean, that's true. I went to a private school for part of my education as a younger guy, and sure, and I was, and certainly it was true then that we as black folks caught a little bit more heck than our white counterparts. I mean, but I think generally speaking, we understand that American society is still in large part governed by racist thinking. To me, what I'm interested in is trying to figure out how we can, what other things we can do that do not involve having our hand out for somebody to give us something. I'm like, look, what can we do? Can we educate ourselves better? Can we become independent or more entrepreneurial? What can we do? Because if we're waiting for the construction of whiteness or the construct that governs all this idiotic, violent, bigoted nonsense, if we're waiting for that to go away, good God, it'll be 1,000 years and we'll still be talking about this very same thing. So what interests me are the things we can do as people. I think going to private schools, certainly that's a help. Certainly if you have a bad public school and you go to private school, if you get a better education, great. But you're still going to deal with bigotry. So I don't know exactly what to do about that. How do we hold white principals, white teachers accountable? How do we do it? I don't know. I mean, it'll be a pretty cold day in Hades when a white principal is going to fire a white teacher probably for disciplining a black kid disproportionately. I just don't know how we do it except keep toeing the line. Like my parents and probably both of these gentlemen's parents said all the time, you got to be twice as good to be treated as equal. And that's the standard you're held to. And of course, people get exhausted trying to be twice as good. But I'm not sure what else we can do except wait for white people to, generally speaking, those who are bigoted, to awaken suddenly and say, "What's wrong? We now realize black people are our brothers and sisters." When is that going to happen? I mean, we have to be able to do
William,
something.
if we keep kicking our kids out, because that's what happens. They get kicked out of school, and then therefore they are set on that prison pipe. What is it? Cradle to prison pipeline.
Right.
Because they don't have any supervision. There's no one there to make sure that they get educated.
I think a lot of times what happens is that when you have a young black child and a young white child, and they do the same thing in school, maybe not the same exact infraction, the white child gets to stay in school and gets disciplined that way. The black child gets sent home. And when the black child gets sent home, then all of a sudden now, if the parents have to take the day off, now they're angry. They come to school angry. And it's just because maybe a child was being a child. On the flip side of that, when you have the parents, my parents didn't play. I had to go to school, and if I got in trouble and the teacher had to call home, I got in double trouble. Today, if the teacher calls home, now the parents want to come and protect the child. My child wouldn't do that. My child wouldn't do that. And they know their child does that. And as long as we keep going down that path, yes, Tim, you said, the principals and the assistant principals, but I think it starts at home. Mm-hmm. And if the home life is not in a way that education is the most important thing, then what's going to happen is that we're going to keep going down this path of nowhere. Mm-hmm. That's what I think.
Amos, you there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that, and also that we are just over it. When it comes to black boys and men, everything is over-enforced in a negative way on black men and boys. And the other thing is that benefits are conferred less. I had a case just this week with the client, and the bank wouldn't deposit a check that I had for no reason. I told my client, this is banking while black. And then the client ran and we did a wire, and they asked him for a Social Security card. On the other end, they don't do that. And I mean, it's like it's breathing while black. It's being a black man. You can't do anything, it seems, sometimes without a hitch being thrown in it. And that's part of the design. So I thought about everything recently, everything the brothers are talking about on the panel today, and you, Sister Barbara, are bringing out on these programs. And it occurred to me that, the way the country seems to militate against the black family, the way the policies are not changing, and our own leadership in too many cases is compromised, co-opted, and or incompetent to address our issues, the way the media change the subject to things that are not as important as other things. I'm all for NFL protests, but all of my clients' jobs they lost are more important than Colin Kaepernick's job throwing a football. Yes, they are. And my clients go to the black churches that finance the pastors who went up to Colin, and I'm for Colin doing his thing, but we really have our own problems that are real. Maybe we just need to put black people on reservation, because it seems like people don't want to be bothered with us. We tried everything. You get shot in the back. You try to keep a job.
That's pretty radical.
You outperform everybody. But they're radical. The people who are behind all of this are radical. One thing that's interesting about the Michael Cohen raid, and I know we're getting to President Trump, is that there is a whole defense industry apparatus that is nameless and faceless that keeps all of this going. And I'm going to give a wall of shame and name lawyers on my website whose names repeatedly come up in these cases, defending the police officers, defending the racist employers, defending that awful North Carolina voter law that, praise God, the Fourth Circuit shut down. I have names. And it's the same people, but we don't ask those questions.
Well,
maybe if they were shamed, we could have a kind of spiritual renewal and have brotherhood and sisterhood.
But
we were on that trajectory when Dr. King was around, and I think we need to name it and shame it.
Well, let me ask you guys this, because we talk a lot about how if we had stronger economic independence in this country, that things would be different. But when we look at this GAO report, even rich kids, African American rich kids, are catching
First of
it.
all, this happened to my kids, and that was 30 years ago. This hasn't changed. This is the same thing. I guess what we've lost faith in ourselves. Too many of us black folks hate each other. We got to clean up our own act. We have plenty of churches. We have plenty of institutionalized capabilities within our own neighborhoods. We have plenty of mentors and leaders, and in this area, military leaders and things that can help us do it. All we need to do is go back to basics. Have some morals, have some values, talk about our own issues of how we're killing each other and deal with that as well, and just don't blame it on the police. What is the police going to care about us if we don't care, if we're shooting each other down like dogs as well? So we have to figure out how to get our own act together. We have a Virginia Union, we have Virginia State, we have Hampton University, we have Norfolk State University. We got a church of premier and prominence on every street corner of every inner city in this Commonwealth of Virginia. We have to take the bull by the horns and become the leaders to save ourselves. The white man is not going to save you. The white man in the White House is not going to save you. The black man that was in the White House is not going to save you. We have to marry the women that we have these babies with. We have to bring them up or do something to bring union and love and respect and mutual understanding to our own community and respect. That's what we've lost. Our kids are bright. Why in the world do we continue to do this? 20 years ago, sir, Hampton University tried to start a charter school. What we wanted to do was to take all these kids that are out there, and we would take any kid, and we guaranteed if that kid graduated and couldn't pass an SOL or didn't have a good average, we would give them their money back. We got it through the General Assembly as somewhat white racist, as some people say, institutionalized stuff. We got it passed by a miracle. We came back to the city of Hampton. We had put over a lot of money into making this happen. The black people on the school board in Hampton helped turn it down. And we were getting government funding, and we could have worked with the Norfolk states to help ourselves. But long, short story, it isn't all the end of the world. We have leadership here that we have to, and I would like to meet this attorney sometime to talk about what can we do. I'm tired of all this stuff and beg. I ain't begging the white man or the black man for nothing. I'm going to take care of my family. I'm going to do what I got to do.
So is that the answer for each of us to individually take care of ourselves, William?
Yeah, I think so. It starts from within. I'm
coming to you, Amos. Go ahead.
I can't keep going out and asking for help. Let's do it from ourselves. It starts within the family. It starts with the mentorship that the parents give us, and then you have your friends that are like that. And as time goes on, you feel better about yourself. You look good, and then you act good. And I think that's something that's important.
Amos, I heard you laughing. What do you think?
Well, yes. I mean, the individual thing, it does start at home. On the airplane, we're told the oxygen mask in an emergency, a crisis, will fall out of the ceiling. And do not help anybody, including your children, until you put that mask on yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Because if you fall apart and asphyxiate or suffocate, then you can't help anybody else.
Right.
So I do think that the first things first, we start at the home, we get the home in order. Hey, the Bible even says your ministry will not be in order if your home life is not in order. Right. And we understood that. The Moynihan report warned about all of this, and it got lambasted largely because the white left-wing community, it's funny, they tell us not to do respectability politics, but they do respectability politics because all politics is respectability politics. It works. Rosa worked. The gay marriage cases, they found the most normal-looking couples they could find to put forth for the gay marriage stuff. Everybody's doing respectability politics, but they try to make black people think it's something else. They want us to believe that it's not about, in some cases, tax cuts. Sometimes tax cuts may help the black community. They really might. Charter schools. If our schools are failing our children, why do we need to follow what the teachers' unions in New York are telling us? It's funny. We have in D.C. public schools are very underperforming, and we have very progressive people in this town, white and black. And the white people who are all for public schools don't send their kids to the public schools. They would never send their kids to these public schools. But that's what we're supposed to do, enough where we're going to use our black elected officials to block the Hampton University charter school. Who black should be blocking a Hampton University charter school? So maybe we need to go Detroit on them. Detroit had something. Here's a solution when we get our house in order individually and go to the community. Maybe we need the black slate. Detroit has the black slate. They started the black slate to make sure that they had black political representation in the 60s and 70s. Well, we know black people took over politics in Detroit. So why does the black slate still exist? Because if you are not black enough,
right,
and you are not for black business and black uplift and black creativity and black charter schools enough, they will take you out.
Amen.
Even though you may have skin that's black like Mayor Dennis Archer, if you're giving away contracts for those casinos and you don't give them to one black businessman out of the 4, they had a recall petition, the black slate.
Amen.
And I'm for 1,000 black slates in the workplace, in the church, and also in the political process.
So Tim, let me ask you this then, Tim. Can we have a black slate but yet still be inclusive? Or does it matter? Or is our community in such a place at this time that we just got to take care of us first?
Well, I think it's really complicated. I had a conversation like this with my students last night about race and how racism operates and how it victimizes on numbers of levels. And the fact is, and I don't want to waste too much time, is that white people are also victims of their own insanity with regard to the construction of whiteness. The disease infects them, they pass it on. So it becomes this kind of epidemic situation. Probably one of the only ways, or one of the ways we could successfully combat it is, in fact, certainly by taking care of our own community first. But of course, that's complicated. Most of us will work in places where our bosses may be white or of other colors. We certainly are not yet in a situation where we can only spend our money in black businesses. At least I don't see that as a real possibility. Generally speaking, in America, there's so many things that we need that probably are not under the dominion of black economic control. So to me, again, it comes back to something very fundamental. I think was said earlier, if we take care of educating our own, taking care of our own families, then perhaps, the venturing forth into the larger culture will be done more successfully. I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think you should ever shut a door in terms of if you have progressive white allies or progressive people of whatever background who can be helpful.
I mean, even in the civil rights movement, there were progressive whites who also helped.
Well, I'm all for that.
The Jewish community really helped. And we're not. This isn't an indictment or a reign against white folks. Out of the 20 white folks that I know, 19 have encouraged me, tried to help me, are my friends, and now part of my family. The biggest problem I have is for getting black people to understand what our interests are. We have to understand that we have to love each other. I'm good to go. Now, this could go on forever. We were taught a simple thing in church. We were taught from the very beginning, Jesus loved you. This I know. So we knew that if Jesus loved me, I love myself. So there was nothing nobody else could do to take that from me, ever. But then we got progressive. We took the religious part that sustained us through slavery out of our schools, out of our communities, and we got lost. We got lost. Red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in our sight. We were always taught to be inclusive. So that has never been a problem. In fact, the issues that we run up against are black people inspired But its system of institutionalized racism, they don't understand, as the good attorney has said, the complications that gets us to where we should and should not be. But this is not an indictment on white folks or white police officers. Again, out of the 100 I know, 99 are square to win, good to go.
So, Amos, we got about 3 minutes left in the show. So, again, should we worry about inclusivity, or should we just, take a time out and just focus on us for a while?
Well, we are automatically inclusive because we are a minority.
Amen.
And white is normative. We get along with whites. We have worked with them. We are interrelated, interconnected. We really share a lot of the same fundamental religious values, whether it be liberal Protestantism, conservative Protestantism, evangelicalism, or you have Catholicism, whatever. And so I think that we are walking hand in hand. But just the way other groups do, we have to look after our unique interests, and they are unique. We're very different from any other group. We were brought here involuntarily and worked for free for hundreds of years, and that's a very different proposition. And we were constitutionally devalued in the very fundamental document of our country. So there are time to time when white America really decides that they're going to try to reform and do better. And so, there's a lot to be had by working together, and we need to be doing that. But we do have priorities that are pressing, and we urgently need to address them internally and from external policies and redress, quite frankly. There needs to be redress. We need more transfers of what is ours. We paid tax dollars and did not get benefits from them for centuries. It's time to take some of that back and allocate that appropriately. That is our money.
Then let William have the last word.
My question is, can we be inclusive to ourselves?
Okay, we got 1 minute to unpack that. What does that mean? 1 minute.
Yeah. A lot of times we fight each other instead of joining together. Yes, we can lock arms and walk down the street, but can we really get along with each other and want to get along with each other and help each other? That's my question.
The only thing that I know my mama told me a long time ago, always remember this: you born black and you're going to die black. And everything that happens in between is going to be a consciousness of you understanding that, son.
Amen.
Okay.
Thank
and with
you.
that, that's the last word. Tim Seibles, poet laureate, community activist Bill Thomas, real estate expert William Russ Brown, and attorney Amos Jones. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining me today on Another View, and we will be continuing this conversation in weeks to come. And thank you, my audience, for joining us for Another View. You can hear this show or any Another View show by downloading the podcast at anotherviewradio.org. We're on Facebook, so like us, and I'm on Twitter at Barbara Ham Lee. Next week on Another View, an insightful conversation with Dr. Crystal Fleming, author of the upcoming book, How to Be Less Stupid About Race, the essential guide to confronting white supremacy. Exactly. And I can't wait to hear from her, absolutely. And we're asking for your support of Another View, so get ready to become a member of WHRV.org. We must give a very special happy birthday to producer Lisa Godley, who I don't know how old she'll be on Monday, but her birthday's coming. Happy birthday, Lisa. We love you very much. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Thank you so very much for listening to Another View.